Some people disappear with a trail of questions. Clues are left behind, theories are formed, but the cases you are about to hear are different. These are the stories of 5 real people who vanished without explanation. There were no suspects. There were no credible theories. In the end, there were no clues left to follow. It's just an unnerving silence where a person used to be. The first case begins on a quiet Tuesday night in October. The streetlights cast a pale orange glow onto the wet pavement. A 28-year-old woman named Emma was walking her dog, a golden retriever named Max. It was their usual route, a simple loop around her neighborhood. Mounted on the corner of a convenience store, captured a brief, grainy image of her. She is seen walking under a streetlight, her dog trotting calmly beside her. The timestamp reads 11:42 p.m. It is the last known image of her ever taken. An hour later, Max returned home alone. He was whining at the back door, his leash still attached to his collar, dragging behind him on the ground. Emma's roommate, hearing the scratching, opened the door to find the dog distressed and shivering, but unharmed. Emma was nowhere in sight. A search began immediately. Her house keys were found lying in the middle of the road, directly under the same streetlight she had passed an hour earlier. They were cold to the touch, glinting in the beam of a flashlight. Her phone pinged a cell tower just once at 11:48 p.m., 6 minutes after she was seen on camera. The location was a small wooded park 2 blocks from her home. Then the signal went dead. Police would later discover a final unsent text message on her phone's cloud server. It was an unfinished message to her roommate. It simply read, "He's he." The message was never completed. There was no body. There were no tracks in the soft earth of the park. And despite dozens of interviews, there were no witnesses. Emma and whoever she was about to mention were gone. The second case is even more perplexing. It involves a man named Alex, who lived alone in apartment 3B of a quiet, unassuming building. He was a 45-year-old accountant, a man of routine. His neighbors described him as quiet but friendly. On a Thursday evening, his sister called him, but he didn't answer. She called again the next morning and the one after that. Worried, she contacted the building manager, who agreed to perform a wellness check. When they arrived at his apartment, they found the door was locked. But it was locked from the inside, with the deadbolt engaged. After gaining entry with the help of a locksmith, they were met with a scene of absolute stillness. In the small dining area, a plate of food sat on the table. The meal was still warm to the touch. The television was on, its low hum the only sound in the room. On a small table by the door, Alex's wallet, keys, and phone were placed neatly in a row. His shoes were tucked just underneath. Everything a person would need to leave the apartment was still there. The apartment was silent. Nothing was broken. Nothing was out of place. It was as if he had simply dissolved into the air. But there was one detail that defied all logic. In the center of the living room, a single dining chair had been placed directly under the hatch leading to the small attic space. Investigators climbed the chair and inspected the hatch. It was covered in a thick, uniform layer of dust. The dust was completely undisturbed. There were no fingerprints, no smudges, no signs that it had been opened in years. There was no sign of forced entry into the apartment, and no rational explanation for how Alex could have left a room locked from the inside, without any of his personal belongings. Our third story takes place on a desolate stretch of highway late one night. Daniel, a 30-year-old sales representative, was driving home from a business trip. His car's dashcam was recording as it always did. The footage shows a long, empty road. The headlights cut a bright path through the darkness. An exit sign for a small rural town glows in the distance. The road ahead is completely clear. Then, the dashcam footage cuts out. Screen goes black. The outage lasts for exactly 12 seconds. When the camera feed returns, the car is no longer moving. It is parked neatly on the gravel shoulder of the highway. The driver's side door is wide open. The car's engine is off, but the hazard lights are blinking in a steady, silent rhythm. Daniel is gone. Inside the car, his wallet was sitting on the passenger seat. His phone was in the center console, plugged into the charger. The last thing it registered was a map route, which ended exactly where the car was found. Outside, investigators found a short trail of footprints in the soft dirt of the shoulder. There were 5 distinct steps leading away from the open driver's door. Then, the prints just stopped. The final footprint was clear, a full impression of his shoe, as if he had stopped mid-stride. Ahead of it, there was nothing. The dirt was smooth and untouched. There was no trail leading into the nearby woods. K-29 units were brought in, but the scent trail went cold at the exact spot where the footprints ended. There were no signs of a struggle, no other tire tracks. Daniel had taken 5 steps away from his car and vanished from the face of the earth. The 4th case began with a single, chilling text message. It was 10:18 p.m. on a Saturday. A young woman named Lily sent a message to her boyfriend. It read, "Someone's in the yard." Her boyfriend, alarmed, called her immediately. She didn't answer. He called 911. Police officers arrived at her ground floor apartment in just under 8 minutes. The scene they found was one of quiet normalcy, but it was deeply unsettling. The apartment was quiet. A cup of tea sat on the coffee table, cold. A book lay face down on the couch, its spine bent to mark her page. Everything appeared normal. The curtains of the large living room window were parted just slightly. They offered a clear view of the small fenced-in backyard. It seemed she had been looking out at something. Her phone was on the floor next to the couch. The screen was cracked, as if it had been dropped. It was the only thing in the apartment that was out of place. Outside in the damp soil just below the window, investigators found a single small footprint. It was a bare footprint, much smaller than Lily's own. It did not match any of her shoes. The rest of the yard was intact. There were no other tracks, no broken twigs, no sign of entry or exit through the fence. Police canvassed the entire neighborhood. Her neighbors heard nothing. No screams, no struggle, no unusual sounds at all. Lily was gone. The final case involves a man named Mark, a 52-year-old who was an experienced solo camper. He knew the woods better than most and often spent weekends trekking through remote national forests. This trip was no different. When he failed to return home on Sunday evening, his wife reported him missing. Rangers found his campsite the next morning, located in a small clearing. The scene was untouched. His tent was zipped shut from the inside. His gear was neatly arranged. The embers of his campfire were still warm. A single set of footprints led away from the campsite, heading toward the dense tree line. Mark's footprints. The trail was easy to follow in the soft ground, but then the trail did something strange. The footprints reversed direction. They started heading back toward the campsite, and they grew deeper, the impressions more pronounced. An expert tracker on the scene noted that it looked as if he was now running or carrying a significant amount of extra weight. The trail of deep, hurried footprints continued for about 50 yards. It ended abruptly in an open patch of dirt in the middle of the clearing. The last print was deep and clear, a perfect impression of his hiking boot. And then there was nothing. The ground ahead was bare. There was no sign of a struggle, no animal tracks, no indication of where he or whatever he might have been carrying had gone. Search teams scoured the forest for weeks. They found no trace of Mark. He had walked into a clearing and simply ceased to exist. Some disappearances leave behind a pattern, string of clues that, when pieced together, tell a story. They might not always lead to an answer, but they offer a path. These cases left nothing. No path, no story, no reason. These were 5 people living ordinary lives. They walked out into the world, into a quiet street, a silent apartment, an empty highway, a dark yard, and a peaceful forest. And they never came back.